Talking about Queen's Gambit is often felt as embarking time machine and traveling to the past, because it was always considered to be sort of cornerstone of black defense against first d4. In modern times, in the middle of the 20th century, in times of Fischer, it was considered to be very passive, and many players rejected it and chose more aggressive openings. While we could always see comebacks, great players and many of their followers returned to the classical heritage and discovered new depths of this great, most solid defense. So let's have a look and let's study the general history of this opening, which survived all the turmoils and all revolutions in the opening history of the game of chess for nearly 150 years. So after d4, d5, c4, we are going to look only at second e6 and to investigate positions that are related to this pawn's composition. Of course, there are many other options for black in this position, but we are not going to talk about queen gambits accepted, which is also a plausible possibility, but it's a subject for another survey. We are also not going to talk about second c6, which leads to a number of options classified in general as a slack defense. Sometimes you could see the move c6 being inserted in the positions that we're analyzing, but still we are making clear distinction between queen's gambit and Slav defense, which is characterized by black's chance of taking on c4 or somehow playing a6. The general difference between Slav defense and queen's gambit is that with Slav defense, black still hopes to develop the bishop on f5 on g4, while in queen's gambit, black is playing solid, protecting d5 square and hoping for solving the problem of bishop on c8 later on. So it was played, as I said, for nearly 150 years, and we of course move with the most natural reply of white knight c3. And here again we're not planning to go very deep into the another side of queen's gambit, so-called terrace defense, where black is immediately attacking the center, in fact agreeing to play a position with an isolated pawn. That's a new type of the positions. It was highly popular at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century, but it lost most of its popularity after Akiba Rubinstein introduced a new system with the fianchetto development of bishop light square bishop from f1 to g2 and putting enormous pressure on black's pawn on d5. There were a number of classical games played by Rubinstein that in fact demolished the beauty of terrace defense in the eyes of contemporaries, and for nearly half a century it was put aside as an insufficient openings, and eventually black moved to classical defense that was employed by that time by such great players as Lasker, Kauplanke and Alokin. But the beauty and the what's special about the queen's gambit, it's the beauty of the opening, that it always makes a comeback. And when you study the history of chess, you could see as in the great players in 10, 20, 30, even 50 years are looking again at the classical composition of this opening and finding new ideas. So to the great surprise of many, at the end of 60s, another world champion, another great predecessor of mine, Boris Spassky, employed terrace defense against Tigran Petrosian, the king of positional chess. And everybody, when they looked at this Spassky's choice, was so confused by this stupid quote-unquote decision, because how could you play against Petrosian the positions with isolated pawn? In fact, Spassky not only survived in his winning match in 1969 against Petrosian, but even had a positive score, winning one game with number of draws. Because he had an ability to look at these positions from a new angle and pose new problems that Petrosian was not able to resolve. Then there was another decline in popularity of this opening, and eventually it was employed by myself in the candidate matches against Belyavsky, Korchnoi, and Smyslov. And I did it very successfully by not losing a single game and winning, in fact, 3 against such a great and powerful opposition. I remember the effect on Alexander Belyavsky when I first time employed this opening in the second game of our match in Moscow in 1983. Alexander was shocked because from his general perspectives, this opening was wrong. It did not fit the conventional wisdom of that time, and he spent most of the time in the opening trying to find not a refutation but at least clear way to get an advantage, and he failed and even lost the game, which had a serious effect on the entire match. And then I also arrogantly employed this opening against Anatoly Karpov, and I had to face not only a great player but an acting world champion who was well prepared for this choice and demonstrated new ways of fighting an isolated pawn, and eventually it ended up as a total disaster, losing games 7 and 9, also not because of the opening, but probably due to the nature of the positions that fit Karpov's style and didn't allow me to show my tactical abilities. I dropped this opening. But the story was not over, and later on we could see comeback and other comebacks of Taras defense, and today White has no clear way of getting a serious advantage in a classical position, which you could see here. After castle, sometimes White is going on dc5, bishop takes c5, bishop g5, d4, and bishop takes f6, followed by knight d5, queen d8, knight d2, or they play more traditional, playing bishop g5 immediately, and after cd4, knight d4, h6, bishop e3, rook e8, we are seeing another classical tabia, another classical position that was checked in many games. White is probably slightly better, and you could look at dozens, hundreds of games played on recently, but Black has enough defensive resources. It's not that the game is over. So as we could see, even Taras defense, which is sort of a deviation from the traditions of the Queen's Gambit, is still holding. But now we want to look at the most important part of the Queen's Gambit decline, of the classical cornerstones of this defense that some people call the opening for the World Championship matches.